Hello, I'm David Major, Director and co-founder of IBEX and I'm here with my fellow directors, Shelley Morgan and Zoe Wood, to talk about some of the biggest changes to unfair dismissal law that we've seen in years. The changes are being introduced by the Employment Rights Act 2025 and are coming into effect from January 2027, just over 6 months' time. So when it comes to preparing for these changes, there's really no time to waste. You may have seen the guidance we've put together already to help employers prepare for these changes. There's a link to it below if you missed it. And we'll be running a webinar on the 2nd of September where we'll be talking in more detail about the changes, their implications, and answering some questions live. So you can sign up to the webinar on the link below. But to give you a flavor of what we'll be talking about at the webinar, we're going to spend a few minutes now just outlining the key changes, their potential impact, and some of the things that you need to be thinking about to prepare for them. So to start us off, Shelley, in simple terms, what are the headline changes that employers need to know about?
So there are two really big changes. The first is that the qualifying period for ordinary unfair dismissal drops from 2 years to 6 months, which means that employers are going to need to approach dismissals in the early stages of employment very differently, because after 6 months, the risk of facing an unfair dismissal claim is going to be a lot higher than it was. The second big change is that the statutory compensation cap is effectively being removed. So for years, unfair dismissal compensation has been capped at a relatively modest level, currently the lower of either 118,000 thereabouts or a year's pay. From January 27, there'll be no cap. And the impact of that will really be felt with dismissals involving high earners, where the removal of the compensation cap could significantly increase risk where processes aren't followed properly. The other significant change that employers need to be aware about is that the time limit for unfair dismissal claims, which for a long time has been 3 months, is increasing to 6 months. So people are going to have more time to submit their claim.
Great, thanks, Shelley. And it's worth pointing out as well that it seems almost certain that these changes are going to increase the numbers of claims being submitted to employment tribunals, where the tribunal system is already under a huge amount of strain. So it'll be really interesting to see whether the government makes any additional funding available to the employment tribunal system to help it to absorb that impact. Zoe, focusing on that reduction in the qualifying period for unfair dismissal to 6 months, what are the potential pressure points for employers as a result of that change?
So I think probationary periods are going to become a really key pressure point. A lot of organisations tend to adopt a fairly relaxed approach to probation periods and perhaps don't manage performance concerns very effectively during those early weeks and months. But from January 27th, employees will have dismissal protection after 6 months. So employers are going to need to be much more structured in terms of reviews, setting clearer objectives and proper documentation from day one. And that means that employers are going to need to think very differently about probation periods and how they manage performance issues and dismissals in those early stages of employment.
Yeah, and in probationary periods currently tend to be 6 months generally. So they will inevitably have to become shorter, I guess.
Yeah, I think we're likely to see probation periods reduced perhaps to 3 to 4 months, and extensions are likely to become much more unusual. And I think it's worth noting that this also puts more pressure on employers to get recruitment decision rights, because employers are going to no longer have that 2 year period of grace to work out whether somebody is right for the job.
So what should HR teams and employers be focusing on before January 2027?
So now is the time to review the employment contracts, look at those probation processes, your dismissal procedures, and your manager training as well. Employers should also look at how performance concerns can be identified and then documented early, because informal conversations alone are unlikely to be enough. These changes are going to require employers to follow really robust processes in the early stages of employment. In short, organisations that prepare early are going to be in a much stronger position.
Mm. Yeah, it's certainly going to be all about the preparation and planning for employers, and the time to start is now. So, we've got more information to help employers in our downloadable employer guide, again, that summarizes the key changes, practical steps that employers really need to be taking now and over the next 6 months to be able to manage these changes. So, do join us at the webinar on the 2nd of September where we'll be unpacking the changes in more detail and answering your questions live. Details of the webinar link below. We hope to see you there.